supported by Qatar National Research Fund and the Ministry of Municipality and Environment of the Qatar government. He is also now leading a project on livelihood improvement through climate smart agriculture, an Australia-India initiative in India funded by Australia-India Council. Professor Huda is also a member of a large international project, Family Farming, Lifestyle and Health in the Pacific, FALA, funded by Europe-based Research and Innovation Staff Exchange RISE program of H 2020. And as a part of the Qatar project, now Professor Huda also recruiting staff and PhD students in Western Sydney University and Qatar University. If any of you, if any of you interested, maybe you can contact Professor Huda. Yeah, I will give his contact email for any of you who interested to to apply for this position. Okay, and also initiating some new international collaborative projects currently. Okay, that's a short introduction about Professor Huda. Professor Huda, time and place is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Let me just share this screen if I can. Okay, and let's see what the could be, and my PowerPoint. Which one is that? Yeah, that's the one, I think. Okay, can you see that, please?
Yes, Prof.
Okay. All right. So, okay, this the topic is given to us is the influencing carbon footprints in agriculture through adaptation of inputs and management of waste. So next slide gives some idea of what we are going to present and discuss and share. Many of you, almost everybody, I think we know we eat food, so we know that food comes not from the supermarket, but it comes from somewhere it's produced, agricultural production. And then we go up to the value chain for a global context. Now, the global consumption, the pressures that you have in the context of generally climate change and climate area, we discussed that. And what it does in terms of greenhouse effects, what impact we do, and how to minimize or mitigate those emissions like methane, nitrous oxides, and some concepts about the ecological footprints. And then, as you see, the title of the presentation talked about adaptation of inputs and food waste, lots of food that we throw, and not only our consumption side, but also when you produce, lots of wastage happens. So what can you do? So those are the kind of things we like to share the storyline. Now, oh, this is the present slideshow. It's not slideshow, it's showing the slideshow or something. Okay, there you go, I think, yeah. What does agriculture involve? This is one of the Boden's model. It shows that those of you who know about agriculture or food, there's a plant system or the crops, vegetables, trees in that sense, if you like to, horticulture crops, animals, we all know that, to milk, meat, those comes from animals. So when you say agriculture, just not food, but also the animal and plant, that's what we think about. But we also create some decompositions, like to maintain some of the organic waste and organic matter that comes, so decomposition subsystem. So basically that, and then we have some inputs to basically what you have to think that to produce food, we put some inputs. Okay, that inputs can be terms of the water and fertilizer, nutrition, and many other things. So that then creates a management system that we have. And over time, we innovate new ideas. You are economists, many of you, the economists and business people, we allocate resources, how much land optimize, how much land, how much water, how much nutrition, how much all kinds of physical resources, human resources. Systems operate. What's the purpose? Ultimately, purpose is to gain the income and livelihood, people's livelihood, right? Farmers' livelihood, and we get food to eat. And so basically, we need to know that produce food over time, what you have done. Initially, in the beginning, many, many years ago, I come from originally from India, so I do know, many of you, maybe other countries, you know what happened, the pressure on the lands. Initially, we had land, but as number of people increased over time, technology came in, all the lands were used. But then people realized just by using more lands, we can't feed people. There are a couple of slides I showed afterwards that, so we need to have increase the productivity. This is what the terminology I'm using. Productivity is the return per unit. You're economic students, you understand that. So if the land is one resource, per unit of land, many years ago is to produce, let's say, X units of food, but through research and innovations, allocating resources, and through operations, we increased the return per unit resource, which is called productivity. That's what we use the term productivity, okay? Now, in doing that, improving productivity for our livelihood enhancement, our lifestyle improvement, that has huge impact on other things, on natural aspects, socioeconomic aspects, cultural factors, evolutionary forces. Those are the arrows that you can see. So it is working interactions, and this is called systems approach. So if you make one change, that will have impact on many other aspects. For example, the basic stuff that if you really want to improve quality of food, many of you would know those come from the rural areas and otherwise reading through your basic knowledge. You need to add fertilizer, nutrition, water, okay, pesticides for the controlling the disease and pests. Okay, we do that, but at what cost? Now you are economics and business management students, many of you, you can think about economic terms. Okay, you apply fertilizer, it costs money, true. But sometimes if you apply too much, it creates pollution. That fertilizer gets wasted, one thing, we are wasting our resource. Also, it goes to the river system or water system and pollutes the pesticide and all that. Many of you, this kind of thing, when talking about the climate change, climate issues, sustainability issues, environmental issues. So agriculture, we need to eat, we need to eat quality food. So we need to do all of it, but we need to appreciate that making one change, it might have impacted other unintended consequences. So we need to manage those kind of things. That's the point. This is the basic stuff I'm going to talk about, this particular slide. And then what can you do in terms of the climate, the soil, plant, animals, people, and those kind of things we are going to discuss. So this is a broader value chain view. Now, again, you know the supply chain and the value chain, food supply chain and value chain. So once you produce the food, for example, here it's basically the slide that you can see here, agriculture production system you looked at in the past previous slides. Now you're talking about economic force, environmental forces, and social forces. They're all interplaying and they're making some impact, right? Now, in terms of improving the production system and productivity with the purpose of increased productivity input, so we need to think the supply chain, just not those who have seen how crops grow in the farm, those who come from rural areas, farming areas, you know, you plant a crop and it grows, you harvest, pack it, sell it, people eat it. We understand that bit. But before then, that suddenly happens. As you said, the fertilizer, the farmers, the producers had to get those fertilizers beforehand to apply. Sometimes you apply before you put your crop in the field. I'm not going to too details about the agriculture side, but I want to give you a bit of a background. Then the marketing starts there. The agribusiness, we talk about agribusiness. Okay, so we need to know before you planting your crop, what's happening there? And those decisions that we make as a community, as a farmer, as a farm advisor, as a consultant, as a business people, because those who sell those products like fertilizer, pesticides, all those things, so they are the part of the total supply and value chain. So they make decisions that we do. It has impact in terms of, again, sustainability concept that we are talking about, right? And the lifestyle. Now, one other thing that I should mention in addition to what we just said then, the value chain means the way you guys will be understanding better, know better than me, I think, is down the line, usually in the past, let's say we used to get this food for some wheat or rice or whatever you get. But these days, in the system of chain, some people, some actors may consider and do add some value to it. For example, produce better quality of beef, certain beef that's more proteinous, so people like it, people pay some more prices. As you know, when you go to supermarkets, at least in Australia that we see, that there's not only beef, but the beef of different kinds, or any meat that you're talking about, different quality, so you pay more. For example, when you come from a village like Indian village when I grew up, you go and buy meat, all same, 10 kg rupees kilo or 5 rupees a kilo or 2 rupees a kilo. But over time, it has changed. Now, if you buy a particular quality, nutrition, then you pay more. So business, I'm talking about the whole agribusiness sector has been developing. So people are adding value, making money, and also to the satisfaction of the customers. See what the customers need, the demand of the customers. And there are a particular type of customers. All generally, when you say we started, I just say people wanted the food. Okay, if you're hungry for days, you'll eat anything. I eat anything, right? When I get hungry, right? I will eat anything. But when you are got enough to eat, then look for quality. And these days, in many countries, almost every country, I think, some people, most people, many people are there for the quality food, for diets and health, all these issues. So for that, in the value chain, lots of things happening, including packaging, for example. Okay, people send a good package of tin, that's what we can talk about, the fruits, they store it and sell it. And so another products, potato-based products or some products that you do and sell it. In the process, we create some activities which will have some carbon emissions of carbon inputs. That's the story I'm trying to tell about. Okay, so as you said that population maybe 7 billion, depends on what you calculate currently. The land area, total of surface area is 51 billion hectare, but only 8 point, out of that 36 is of sea and 14 is land. Only 8 billion hectares is biologically productive. I think many of you understand that not all the lands can be used profitably or sustainably for production. Now, the big questions to you, all of you, how do you manage the 8.3 billion hectare to ensure global food security and world population? How to do it in a way that is ecologically and environmentally, socially sustainable? Now we must, in doing that, we must balance. I'll show you some slides. You know most of it, well, in the perspective that you're talking about. So we must balance our consumption with the natural world's capacity, not only to produce, but also to absorb the waste that we produce. Lots of wastage that we do, that needs to be managed. Less in Australia, the landfills, other countries just throw it. And that creates some pollution, that creates some emissions, that creates other issues. So need to think about all that. So this includes taking into account the effects of projected anthropogenic climate change. Now, this is the slide. It tells a lot. You might have seen other places, I'm not sure, but just look at it and think a bit critically. What's happening from the sunlight, we're getting solar radiation, and that hits up, warms up the land, the water, the atmosphere. In the process, naturally, what's happening, you can see that it is coming, and it's very critical. The solar radiation is coming because then it's heating up the whole system. And some of it goes back to the space, atmosphere, terrestrial long-wave radiation. But all of the radiation that is coming, all of it is not going back. Some being absorbed in the system, one is going back to the space. And this is what we call a greenhouse warming. What is going back, and some of it is absorbed by the system. And that's important. In the natural condition, that is why you can live. Otherwise, if that is not absorbed, everything was gone back, it will be very cold. We cannot possibly live on this earth surface. The temperature much cold, minus 18 degrees, something would have been. So naturally, the radiation is coming, some of it going back, some of it being observed, and that's fine for natural conditions, living the earth systems. But with these human interventions, like I just said before, we are agriculture want to improve productivity, so we are using more lands, we are using more fertilizers. So think about the value chain I talked about. To create fertilizer, to get fertilizer, you have to factories, what do you call the industries, pesticide, packaging. So in all that, human interventions, what you're doing it, human activities, just give an example, there is something that's happening, and that in the greenhouse is warming up. And you have seen number of data, different places, different presentations. I'll show some. So this is what we're talking about. The cycles of carbon cycles over time, over hundreds of years, there's plenty of this, but now we are using fossil fuels, keep on using it. Okay. the land use, but we're also adding something through some natural processes like photosynthesis and all that. But there is some sort of imbalance being created. And this is what you're talking about, our impact on the carbon cycle is that we're moving vast amounts of CO2 from the long-term carbon cycle to the short-term carbon cycle. Now, there are a number of issues, the IPCC assessment report 2014, and recently there was other meetings that high the degree, the agriculture is inherently dependent on the climate. As you keep on saying that in a complex and non-linear manner. It's a high degree of consensus amongst leading global models that happening up to 2100. What's going to happen? Global higher concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide. For the many crops, yield increases are possible because CO2 increases. Some new cropping areas are there on higher latitudes because higher temperature. But some other areas that could be different. Higher temperature means quality of food may deteriorate. Adaptation potential for agricultural production. Some estimates says that the IPCC estimates that with agronomic adaptation, yield can be a rise of 15 to 18%, but there will be enormous variability. These are all some estimates. Some pictures about the land use account, depends on which data that you see, just an idea that the emissions from agriculture, other land use, energy emissions, transport, so they are different sources which is contributing to the different kind of emissions. So we are talking mostly about agriculture and some land use aspects, but they are all linked. You just can't stop because you say in agriculture, we're using energies. So some idea about what constitutes a greenhouse gas. It is sensitive to absorb and emit along with infrared radiation. Water vapor is the most prevalent one and accounts for 33 to 66% of the greenhouse effect in weather, clear weather. A short atmospheric lifetime, whereas others, naturally occurring carbon dioxide is the next most prevalent one. See, look at some of the numbers. Carbon dioxide is right now maybe 395, 400, depends on what you look at measurement per millions, parts per million, the methanes, nitrous oxides, and ozones. There's one concept here I want to introduce. I'm not sure whether you have seen this before, the global warming potential. This 400 means carbon dioxide, same gas methanes is 25 times. Nitrous oxide is 298 times. If the 1 ton kind, that's the concept, is some sort of relative concepts of carbon dioxide to methane in terms of global warming potentials. The methane, for example, is coming from rice. Many of you say that you're from Philippines or India, where you produce lots of rice, eat lots of rice. So there is a methane coming. There are different ways now. Lots of research being done over years to have a different management system. I'll show you some recommendations toward the end. There are ways of managing the systems of production to minimize methane production. Similarly, in the rice, for example, here. Similarly, in the animals, there are a number of ways, again, that can be done, including the feed that we do, and lots of research being done around the world, including Australia, about that, how to minimize that aspects. The next one is the nitrous oxides, it's the fertilizers. The sources coming from different places in agricultural soils have, domestic animals give, grasslands, tropical forests, everywhere you can get that. Now, about 40% of nitrous oxide emissions come from human activities. It's very important that we add, as I said in the beginning, nitrogen fertilizers, other fertilizers as well. Given an example of nitrogen, not only production, but also quality. Many crops, we think about, let's say, wheat. There are certain times in the crop cycle when you produce, you need to add enough nitrogen to get the protein quality of the grain, that's what we eat. And the bread, for example, kind of breads, we eat some high quality bread and protein qualities. So it depends on whether or not we're applying enough nitrogen at the right time. Get that. That's one example. But this is where a lot of research, including modeling that we do, I'm particularly interested in that field, linking about the climate, use of climate and soils and crop information. Can we help the growers or the farmers or decision makers to determine how much fertilizer, nitrogen, for example, we should add so that it is being used up by the plants to produce food, but also good quality food. But from knowing from the physiology of the plant and the soils and plant aspect, different aspects of management, we can work with people and get that a balance that we don't put too much of fertilizer, nitrogen, so that it's not useful. Not only we're losing money in buying it, but also it is lost in the system, creating pollutants and pollutions different places in the water and the soils, and some of the toxicity may happen. So those are the kind of things we do in the research, bringing people, knowledge, science knowledge, management aspects to help improve decision-making, alternatives, and getting the better return out of scarce resources like water. Same story with water. You don't want to apply too much of water. Sometimes we do, even though there's not enough water, but we have a tendency to apply. If you have as much as you have, just go and apply. Not many people do that these days. People are listening, not only because of saving the dollar values, but also resources. So a lot of scientific information, management information are available, and some of the modeling tools help to farmers. One other thing is people are talking about organic farming and talk about use only livestock manures, no adding commercial or chemical fertilizers. That's a big debate. I'm not getting into that debate, but I think we need to have a combination approach. That's what I think. You need to have only through organic livestock manure, which I have seen from my early days. My uncle and others people in the villages, they didn't use chemical fertilizer initially, based on all these cow dung and other plant waste is go in the field and grow. But then they changed over time. To get production and quality production, we need to have a balanced approach because through using livestock manure also can create the emissions problem, carbon emissions as well. Okay. Now, so some of the greenhouse gas emission reduction actions for agricultural inputs. So decision has to be made of land and soil type to choose the crops. And then there is a trade-off in the land use pattern, crops versus tree planting. For example, which will give a better return. Should we grow mango orchard instead of growing some crops? Should we put in agroforestry both crops and plants? It's not always possible, one thing, but this is where the decision of the farmer we discussed that one changes somewhere will have impact somewhere else. So optimization carbon footprint and input use like fertilizer, pesticide, and machinery talking about. solar power driven. There are now many facilities are available. Towards the end, from the agronomic and the crop production point of view, it was improving soil health, carbon sequestration, and crop rotations. I'm not going to detail in that because it's not an agricultural class, I believe, but then business perspective and agribusiness perspective are trying to bring, and a sustainability perspective, that you need to maintain soil is a very important resource. This is where we're growing crops. And so we need to look after the soil. And improving soil health, one option is crop rotations. You need to have a plan which crop grow to when, I think. That's all I leave there. Now, concept of ecological footprint. I'm sure you all have heard that word at this time, and I'm giving you our perspective. Is increasingly people are aware of the impact our current lifestyles have on it. So, but is it that ecological footprint is not about how bad things are, just about how things are? It's a tool to measure our ecological performance. Okay, we can do it through individuals, how we live. If I ask you that, let's say, if we go back and think about that number, you said about 8 billion hectares of land, and you got 7 billion people. So if whole world is equally have access to the land, all people, so basically you and I have about 1 hectare of land, or maximum 2 hectares of land. So we need to live with that amount of resources, land, because this is basic land resources, is producing food and lifestyle. So we need to think about how much biological productive land area that we are using it. Can we, the way we live, can we live the way we're doing, or do we need to adjust in our lifestyle? To measure resource use against the bioproduction of the earth is directly linking between what you do with the amount of land that is there, and also taking into account that land that is required to absorb the waste. And importantly, of course, if we discuss, you'll find and tell us it depends on the technology as well, because 10, 20, 30 years ago, we have a different technology. Now we have another technology improving. So research and development has to go on. And also we need to understand that of the production of food, quality food, but at the same time, the waste that we create, how can we manage them? I think I just mentioned this one. Basically, that's what we said, that the per person, you and I, maximum have about 2 hectares of land. But then we are the human beings. You think about there are other 30 million fellow species on this earth. So they also need some share of this productive space. So World Commission on Environmental and Development allocated, let's say about 12%, if we just say that, okay, 12% of it. And that's why we get about, think about the biodiversity, the 2 hectare per capacity per person, maximum 1.8 hectare. So this is what we have, but if we do, I'm not sure whether you have done any eco-footprint calculations. I have some, down the line, you can see some links given. If you want to do, usually you ask some questions, how we live and what we do, and we can come up with whether we are living sustainably or not, what else can be done. Now, in doing this process, introducing this concept, we have seen this diagram before, but you see from the production perspective, how to create better food, higher food, more food, quality food with optimal resource use. But here is another aspect, that is what we call the support services for the managing the waste products, something like that. Okay, so agricultural production is there. and then the supply side, output, the transformation, the consumption, and waste disposal. Okay. At this point in time, how we manage that? It has, again, some impact. Like this side, the production side impact. Similarly, the waste management, how much food is wasted. It's very important. And think of the whole agribusiness, supply and demand or value chain concepts. Now, you often talk about food security and waste. Food security exists when all people at all times have physical access to the food, right? Safe food, nutritious food. Okay, this is the definition World Food Summit get. Okay. Now, there are the pillars to understand that food security or food insecurity. One is availability. It can be there, but access. For example, with this COVID thing we have seen, people are panicking to, many, including Australia that we have, they panicking to get some access to the food. Sometimes we don't get this or that kind of stuff. So we get a feel for it. What many people around the world are facing day in, day out. So we are fortunate, many of us are very fortunate to have available food to us, quality food to us, access to it. But only question is that whether we are making good use of it for our basic nutrition and sanitation and all that. So this is a food secure country, a food secure nation, food secure world means everyone should have food available, good quality food, they have access to it, and they use it for the knowledge and other things that we have to have a nutrition. Sometimes we overeat, sometimes malnutrition, and don't have the dieting nutritious food, and the combinations of it, education. Those are the kind of things, parts of the food security issues. Now, this is just a demonstration with some numbers across the world, like North America, the developed world, the industrialized world, Europe, Latin America, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and you will find that different stages of this value chain or supply chain, right from the production to the handling and storage, the processing.
Hello, Prof. Anybody can hear Professor Huda's lecture? No. Yeah, Prof, we can't hear you. Oh. Mas Arief kelempar ya Profnya ya?
Ya Bu, jaringannya.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's all right. We wait for Professor Huda rejoin, yeah? Guys, you can start write down your question in the chat room. You will have additional points for each question that you raise. Okay, okay. Professor Huda, I think it's can join us. Prof Huda. Hello, Prof. We can see your screen, but we can't hear you.
You okay now? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Yes, Prof.
Okay, we just lost our connection, I think. Yeah, okay, that's good. So we were there where you were. I think we are here. We've done that. We've done. Okay, no, you're here. Just there. I think. Okay, I need to go and on slide, on current slide. Okay, that's where we were. I think that's right. Okay. Okay. Can you see me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is what explaining that the origins of food waste and during or immediately after harvesting on the farm, handling and storage, processing like during industrial or domestic processing and or packaging, and distribution marketing. So we are familiar with that and aware and how much the food waste is happening and what can you do. Most importantly is you all people here attending and listening and including me and everybody, where we think we can minimize the food waste, particularly towards the end, like when you're eating it, it has added lots of footprint. Because when you're producing added fertilizers, so you produce kind of, when you're losing wastage, like here, production side is okay. But if we're wasting the food here, it means lots of things gone into it, right? Energy in terms of carbon footprints. We need to be very careful to waste. So we don't understand that. This is where the education aspect coming in and cultural and educational aspect in the family. And we need to all think the value of each grain of cereals, each grain of food that we eat. I think, and if we're wasting that kind of stuff. So this is another story, and we had a project I just finished with, again, safeguarding food and environment in Qatar. It's a large project that we work with about the human consumption and the food behavior that we have in terms of what can you do in terms of minimizing the food waste. Because it adds, as you say, carbon footprint we're talking about. It's a huge contribution you're making. Okay, so there it is. Some definitions of food losses is a logistics driven, take place during agricultural production and post-harvest and processing. Usually we use the food waste is occur at the end of value chain. This is distribution time and final consumption and behavior driven. And we can avoid food like edible, people will do it. Many countries like including Australia, some of the foods well available, but can somebody use it? If you're not taking it, similarly possible avoidable, unavoidable, some of those things as their classifications. Now, logistics-driven fossil fuel dependency. See, this is where more important for us. Is this sustainable? The global energy demand is going up. Fossil fuel reserves going down. The costs of fuel going up. Is this environmentally friendly? Global energy going up and then fossil fuel consumption, greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to think about to increase utilization of sustainable and renewable energy resources. Now, there's a big debate around the world. If we just open up the discussion, there'll be, I don't know how many people are there right now. So we'll have different views in terms of what is renewable, what is sustainable, and how do you do it, what are the issues. As a debate, as a policy level, government level, scientific level, all happens, and business kind of things. Big discussion. Okay, so it is other parts of the agricultural value chain as well. This depends not only the West kind of thing. Now, simple idea is that kind of things that we eat, if you are doing your lifestyle analysis, how you live, now the typical ecological footprint is very high for meat and livestock-based products, if you're eating that, okay? Because it costs a lot of energy to produce 1 kilogram of meat. And in that process, also packaging, we get the packaging, it costs, again, typical ecological footprint impact. The processed foods that we eat, it needs energy and all that to get it, so it's a high. Whereas fruit and vegetables is a very low ecological impact. It doesn't mean that we have to eat only fruits and vegetables, but I'm saying that need to perspective, and it also gives some nutritious balance that we need to think about. Now, when we mention that ecological footprinting, these are some of these links you can try in your own time, if you like. It will ask you some basic questions depending on which calculator you look, what sorts of diet you have, like you said, if you're eating only meat, there's high impact. If you're eating only vegetables, another kind of impact. So depending on what sorts of food habit we have, they will ask that question. And about the transport, how often you are driving to go to your work, to go to other places, or you are walking, or bicycle, or public transport, all those kind of questions they will ask. Okay, similarly, what sorts of housing do you have? What sorts of consumer products do you have? Recycling. So using those kind of assumptions or the values that you put in, you will get your footprint, or my foot if I do it. Okay, so that also depends when you do it, at what point in your lifestyle, life cycle, and which day you do. So depending on that and what calculations make, footprint that you use, you'll get a number of what do you call that, the footprint. Many times in my class that we teach, some students may say they need 3 planets to live the way I'm living, or 7 planets, depending the kind of business I do. So depending on what sorts of enterprise or business you are associated with. So that's what you will come up with. So it gets very interesting. But simply, I'll try. If you get time, you can do it, but you can do it on your own time. Choose one of them and see how many arts that one of us need. Can you leave it with this kind of art that you have, less 1.7 hectare? That's all you got. Do you live with? Can you do that? Okay, some kind of area of activity, what we can do to minimize that footprint. Choose food and diet, adopt high vegetable and grain diet. Reduce meat consumption by fresh foods. Reduce purchase of prepackaged foods. Transport by local foods. If you grow locally, sometimes we live in an area where foods are coming from hundreds of miles away, 1,000 miles away sometimes, right? So that adding the transport costs and the carbon footprint there. Adopt more fuel-efficient modes of logistics, warehousing like fuel efficiency machinery, efficient refrigeration, all those kind of things. Processing, what you do, take some kind of actions in terms of resources and processings. Okay, so a number of things that we can do as individuals and as a nation and as a community in terms of reducing the footprint, and that context, the footprints of agriculture, because we all eat food and quality food that you're doing. Towards the conclusion side then, what you can do is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. How can you do it? Agriculture, including animals that you do, because we get the milk and meat. We need those animals and plants best. Methane emissions, fossil fuel use in fertilizer and pesticide and waste management, biomass burning and stubble removal, land use and land management. This is one of the key areas that we do from our research and community activities. What sort of land, how can you use our land more sustainably? Okay. And the potential for soil management to store carbon and carbon farming, as you say. How do you get more of those vegetables, parts of the plants to the soils to go in carbon sequestration? Now, natural resource management for enhancing productivity and farmers' income is very important because the livelihood improvement. The people are living and they need to not only eat, but also support the family and the community. So we need to evaluate more sustainable, climate resilient, healthy agricultural agri-food systems models, which are low carbon footprint. So there are crops like nutri cereals, millets. I'm not sure some of you may know, the millets are very I just said some part of India, not the part that I come from originally, eastern part of India, the West Bengal. People are eating rice, but the southern part of India, where I used to work, institute called ICROSAR, some of you might know, the International Crops Research Institute for the semi-arid tropics, like the IRI, that International Rice Research Institute in Philippines, many of you know. A similar sort of institute that is based in, called ICROSAR in, let's say, Hyderabad, South India. Many people in southern India and other parts, they eat the millets. It's a very nutritious kind of food, but over time, people are changing their food habits, like rice and wheat, people prefer. So I think people have to think about over time the nutritious food, what are the alternatives we have. And traditionally that was grown, millets and sorghums. They also need less water than rice and other crops. So techno-economic evaluation, efficient water management system, we need to think about improved innovative irrigation technologies. So I'm just saying that not if you want to grow crops, which are high value crops, people prefer it. If it needs water, okay, go ahead and use it. But the technology that we need to use and the science will continue on. We are still continue and the research. How do we have a more water efficient system? In other words, 1 drop of water or 1 millimeter of water can give us more yield, like kilograms or quantities that by unit area, more can be produced. This is kind of research we do. Many of us around the world do. I work in a collaborative mode nationally and internationally. Some examples Melanie just mentioned. Currently 3 or 4 projects that we're working on, meaning few of them. So we continue to initiate new areas of work and research. Very important, but we focus mostly in the water, nutrition, and pesticide management and the climate aspects. The technology very important. Need to the one point I'll mention here, just not only have the science, but whether or not the science is being adopted. I had finished a project funded by Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research in Cambodia. I worked a number of years in that country through collaborative mode. One aspect was to find out all the millions of dollars being spent there on the rice aspect, how much of those technologies by the country like Cambodian Agricultural Research Development Institute, but around the world, US, Australia invested a lot of money there. Now, how much of those technologies are being used by farmers and the systems and extension systems? If not being used, much of it, or some of it, why? Okay, so that's another story. That's a big project. We finished it, so that's another story. But it's not only Cambodia; it's everywhere. Technologies are there. If farmers or people are end users, we call it, not using it, don't blame them. Not blame the end users. We have the researchers and the technology development people need to think as well. Where are the missing link so that the amount of efforts, including the dollar value, has gone into the research, are being really applied and used by the people who need it most. There are, again, just not only science issues, the social science issues and economics and cultural issues, many other things are there. And this is why I love it, to have interaction working with the slides, first slides you have seen that is the interaction of social science, economics, environment, and natural sciences. The use of food waste in stimulating economy, a facilitating role in informing business of proven methods to food waste volumes and the suitability of on-site food processing technologies. Lots of work being going on around the world, including Australia and in Qatar, as you mentioned, that how can you use some of the food waste to have a big industry? Can we kind of come up with? Okay, is adding the soil's carbon, but also that will help down the line production, productivity, but other business can develop. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so connecting the business community with resources and services for food waste reduction and management. A couple of slides here to show what the brief illustration, what can you do through some technologies, like if we use the climate resilient crop variety we choose, that will give some of those crops that you go, the tolerant to flood, drought, salt, heat, short duration, high yielding. Now, these are all some outcomes are there from research, but some are being utilized over time to reduce the greenhouse effects, and some still need some more work to do. And another example could be integrated farming, where crop, livestock, fishery together we work with. Those who come from the developing world and subsistence farming, and I've seen the same family village, we have some crops, some livestock like poultry and fish and animals together, just not one. But some areas now become one crop because of the agricultural business kind of thing. They're growing only one crop, for example, one farm, just growing specialty on only particular crop kind of thing. Okay, I'm a beef farmer, or I'm a producer, or I'm a grain producer, wheat producer. So that's a different kind of concept, but depending on where you live and what works for you or for me, we need to think about it. And I did mention about organic farming. It does help, but if everything goes on organic farming, can we feed really 7-8 billion people? Do you have that capacity? And what other issues will be there? The prices, all that kind of stuff. We need to think about. So it's all the options are there. So it's we give an option from research point of view, from researchers' point of view, but it's up to the public and the people and the farmers to choose which works for that family or for that farmer or that farm person or whoever it is. But most importantly, I said a few times, improved nutrient management. We need to understand about the science of it. Lots of science results exist. We need to promote, and we need to use it. If we don't use it, as you said, it's not only have those carbon footprint adding, but also polluting environment. We talked enough of that. Use of efficient microbes. And these are, again, very important one, and we're doing the research, continuing on the water-saving technology. People here and many countries, I've seen they still use furrow irrigation. I'm not sure they know. Lots of water that goes on, but you can use it, different modes. So people are doing it now. It's automated irrigation now. I was talking to another project this morning with a few of my colleagues, talking about the automated irrigation, linking with how much temperature today, how much evaporation is today, and what crop growth stage is, what is going to rain today, and then they can switch on through so much computerized that you can put how much water should be put, when to put. Even remotely, farmers are doing. Good example from Israel and many other countries they're doing, I think. People do it in the island countries, those automated technologies are there. Conservation agriculture, I'm not going to details of that. I think may not be appropriate areas for this class, but just think about those aspects are there, like zero tillage, we call crop rotation, residue in the soil, waste land management, forestry, agroforestry, grassland, different ways we can manage our land. And that gives not only economic return, but also the soils and natural resource management. And the use of non-conventional energy, solar and wind energy, in place of fossil fuel, or in combination, we need to think about it. And this is a very important one. Melanie, you can think about in your class, and hopefully you can promote the role of education program. The students in the class, hopefully some of you, or most of you, or all of you, or each of us have got some take-home message that to live sustainably, including starting from me and starting from us as an individual, what sorts of things that we can do in terms of improving waste system, reducing waste, recycling better, what are the opportunities are there? Now we need to think about those, what we can do as individual and as group, as community, and particularly the students, those who are, you'll be the future leaders. And in your own countries, many of you will be making policies and decisions which will have huge impact, not only the area that you are working on, you'll be working, but around the world. Because chain, as you can see, that if what you produce, many countries now buying food from different countries, like Philippines, Australia, buying from India, India buying from Australia, or Cambodia, and different countries now happening, right? So we have that connections, international interconnections world that we live with. So just last few slides is the United Nations 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals. You all have heard that different times. Significant improvements have been made in agriculture so that we live. I remember in 60s and 70s in India, particularly in 60s, thinking about that, okay, India won't be able to feed people because people are now population increasing, but productivity. But you know now, India is a self-sufficient country. Not only that, but is giving food to other countries as well to some extent. But having said that, I'm just giving an example, like it's true for all countries. If you recall that food security, the pillars, that does everyone have access to the food at the same time, same quality, good quality food? If you think about it, it still is a problem. We still have to think in the UN 2030 goal. We need to think about how can we do so. Agriculture plays a very important role, and all the science and technology, land management we talked about plays a huge important role, continues to play an important role. Because not only production of food, as you keep on saying, quality food, and at the same time, we need to think about not wasting, not polluting environments, right? And we can leave the world that is sustainable for not only for us, for our children and grandchildren and time to come. So that's the way you have to think. And we need to think about the consequences that we do, and so that people can live with the dignity and their livelihoods. Almost all of the 15 SDGs that we have, they have concerned linkage with agriculture. And agriculture cuts through the entire food, nutrition, health. I've not talked much about it, but then again, to be healthy, you need to have healthy food. Don't eat too much, too little nutritious food, right? So it is a nexus of food, health, environment together. We need to think overall aspects, okay? And equity and sustainability to build a world that we want to live in. So global imperative in developing a shared agenda, promote alternative human actions, reduce carbon intensity, to support the acquisition and deployment of skills needed to enable the reduction across many facets of everyday's work. Lessons learned and future directions. Education, very important for sustainability, is about changes of values and our attitudes. But not through only abstract knowledge. Knowledge is important. If we are learning something, that's great. But how could we impart that knowledge, share that knowledge, apply that knowledge, reflect on it, explore different options, engage with the people and the community, and really make real differences and contribution in the society? This is what is the education, very important. We all know that through education, just one, I believe in God given, of course, a given opportunity. I come from a very remote village in West Bengal in India. Now, again, I would say the God given that the knowledge and education helped me to go around the world. Right now in Sydney and working and talking to a number of people. I'm not sure how many it is for different countries. So it is about education. So education, not only your knowledge, by my knowledge, but you need to share that knowledge. And that by sharing knowledge, it increases. I'm learning as you go along, already learned a few things, even though there's no interaction, but when I'm saying something, I can see what's going on back of my mind, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Huda. Very interesting and inspiring lecture, yeah? Anybody wants to ask question to Professor Huda? I have some questions, but I just give you opportunity first, students. Hello, is there any questions? Okay, Lizzo. Lisa, do you want to directly raise your question to Professor Huda, darling? Lisa? Or you want me to read it? Okay. And after that, Jacqueline, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, Lisa have a bad connection. Okay, Professor Huda, what is your opinion for those business entrepreneurs who converted the agricultural land to residential or commercial one, wherein that country is a self-reliance on agriculture that they had in what way possible? They cannot somehow distort that arable land. Thank you.
Very good, interesting, and useful comments. And I get similar sort of questions from our students. For example, I live, as you say, live in Sydney, western part. I'm not sure any of you, except Melanie, would know Sydney. I live in, because our university, Western Sydney University, and Hawkesbury campus, it was built, when was it? 1880s or something, and more than 130, 40 years ago. When the British moved here, they knew that they have to produce, need to have the food, local food. So from Sydney to nearly about 60 kilometers towards the Blue Mountain side, there's a river there, good soils are there. It's called Hawkesbury area where we are located, University in the world. It's a good agricultural area. Now, that's great. And just in line on your question, so what happened? Therefore, over time, the pressure on land was there for people are increasing. Right now, Sydney population could be, depending on where you ask, 3 to 4 or 5 million people there. People are growing. They say every week, so many people, new people coming to Sydney. So near our campus, some of the village areas called Pit Town or all that, the development the last few years. Now the question is, we call it who is right? Is a balance. Now, should we grow food or should people have their living? Residential, people have to live as well, right? And so this is a kind of questions keep on coming, not what you said, but we need to have a balance. But once we have the impact of the urbanization, peri-urbanization on the impact of the soil quality, the quality of the river water, and the biodiversity. We, in one of the class that I teach, the environmental risk management, for example. So people will ask a similar question and ask, okay, now pit town development, for example, what impact does it have? Now, whether or not the farmers, they used to grow those agriculture crops, feed local people, many are growing the turf instead of
Hello, Prof. Huda. We can't hear you again. Maybe again bad connection. Maybe you can try to stop share screen, Prof. Huda. Maybe it will improve a bit the network problem. Okay, maybe Prof. Huda try to reconnect. Okay, after this, I will pick Jack question, and then after that, Hasna, yeah? All right. We're still waiting for Professor Huda to reconnect to this Zoom link.
Yeah. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Still
Hello?
this. Yes, Prof. Not really clear, Prof. Your voice. So,
Can't hear me?
not yet, Prof. Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, then we can see you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So just finish that discussion that we were having about the, of course, we need to have a balance of the urban development and peri-urban development. And now, just having said that, because of economic pressure and all that, people have to do it. But now again, in the last few years, people are talking about locally grown fruits. And we have a cooperative kind of system. The farmers in the local Hawkesbury areas, they are growing the food to supply quality food to the local people. So to answer your question, I think there's no one answer, but depending on where you are, what you do, and then need to have a systems, whether you can grow locally crops, but people have to live as well. I think, where do you live it? Okay.
All right. Yeah. Lizzo. Yeah, I think it's your question has been addressed. Yeah. Next question from Jack. Jack. Yeah, you can ask Professor Huda.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Okay, good evening, Prof. So my question is, how effective the good agriculture practices in order to address the waste management? Because we know it is a certifications, but to what extent it is relevant to address the waste management? Thank you.
Thank you again. Very important. The question about the good, you raised the point, good agricultural practices or best management agricultural practices. Depending on where you are, most countries or most regions will have their best management practices. So, but your question is more importantly towards waste management, right? That's what we're talking about, right? Now, if it's waste management, the definition of the waste is the way one of the slides we showed that when you talk about food waste, usually you think about towards the end of the value chain, like when you eat, we throw food, that's the food waste. But also food, if you're talking about food loss, like right from the production side, sometimes farmers are not able to harvest because of the rain happens, they are not able to harvest the rain crops, right? You have a very good crops in frost. Those who have a problem, the frost problem, I give you an example. In Australia, we are discussing with my colleagues who's a farmer, and you're saying that, oh, my crops are very good, wheat going very well this year. Then comes one morning, and when you talk, it's like all gone because the frost came and the all wheat crops lost. That farmer even doesn't know whether they can invest to harvest the crop. If we go and harvest, it costs more energy, larger farm, large farm. So they may not want to harvest because it costs more money, more energy kind of thing. So depending on when that loss happens, so we need to maximize, or we need to have the management practices. There are a number of management practices are there that what one can use. And so depending on the food loss system, so we can do, for example, on a harvesting, lots of food are being wasted through harvesting. So maybe you have a management systems like good kind of machineries where we lose less wastage will happen, food losses will happen kind of thing, okay? So I think, and then, for example, there's one of the things I say, packaging kind of thing. Lots of food can waste if you don't package it properly, right? So the different stages are there, and there were some standard management practices people are using, and we need to go. And this is what more research needs to be. To answer your question, also more research is required. For example, when do you harvest? Coming up when you harvesting your crop, different ways of moisture content of the seeds, color of the plants, color of the fruits, depends on what you are harvesting, kind of thing. So yes, but there are some standard and good management practices already exist. People are following it, but this can be improved.
How's that, Jack?
Yeah, crystal clear for me. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay, thank you, Professor Huda. I want to pick whose question? Wahyu. Wahyu from Indonesia, right? Wahyu. Wahyu, are you here? You want to ask Professor Huda directly, or do you want me to read your question? Okay, I just read it. Yeah. Okay. Professor Huda, what is more important to do to deal with climate change in agricultural sector? Often, adapting requires technological input, so it costly, and I think it's a problem for developing countries.
Yes, I can see that question in the chat box. Thanks for lecturing. So my question, what's more important? Do you deal with the climate change in agriculture sector? Often adaptation requires technological input, so it's costly. I think is a problem for developing countries. Oh, very good question. And thank you for that. So what do you have in mind? If you think that, depending on, looks like you have been thinking about the issue, and you're saying that adaptations costs money. So what options do you have? Do you want to minimize it? What do you want to do then? I think I give not only for agriculture, but overall story I'll give ideas. Developed world versus developing world. And just not only agriculture, but also lifestyle kind of thing, right? The people in Australia and America and other places, they are talking about, okay, should use public transport or should use walking, bicycling, all that. But people in India, for example, still like to have a car. They say, okay, we like to have a car. We need to go around because we need to have a fridge and all that kind of stuff. So coming back to the agriculture, this is the issues. There's no state solution. But agriculture, for example, adaptations, where possible, we should do, because there are some technologies can be done, right? For example, if you, as I say, okay, if you don't want to, in a low rainfall area, we still want to grow rice because I want to eat rice. Okay, you can eat rice, but maybe you'll be better to grow millet and then sell it and buy rice. But that's not simple. I'm not saying that there's a very simple solution. Your question is very deep questions. It cannot be answered over time, but it needs a discussion. And where possible, we can adopt and improve management technologies. But where not possible, so alternatives need to think about. And sometimes maybe you need to mitigate issues, right? And that's why number of protocols are there in terms of overall sustainabilities.
Oh, yes. All right. Yeah, Wahyu, I think your question is, yeah, needs more discussion.
More discussion, but thinking about it, yes. It's a very good question, and there is no one answer for it. You're saying the adaptation requires technological input. So maybe do you have the technology first input? Maybe you need to do more research about your own area, what technologies exist,
right,
and what can be resource efficient, for example, in terms of water efficient, nutrient efficient. And then it may be cost effective. It may not be cost effective because you need to do more research. But I think each country, many countries will have access to the knowledge produced in their own country or international. And then that can, depending on which country, what locations you're talking about, you can then see what technology, what cropping practices, what food you are referring to, and see what technology exists and what is lacking for the farmers not to adopt it. And so maybe the social issues, many times you will say maybe the farmers have other priorities in their mind. So that's why they don't adopt it. So there's lots of aspects out there. If people are not adopting it, we can understand that, but they can be addressed, some issues.
Yeah, many variables, yeah, Prof. Yeah, depends on many variables. Right. Gemma raised hand. Gemma, you want to ask question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Good afternoon, sir. I just wanted to ask this. Agricultural practices could really make our economy rise, but at the same time, we cannot deny the fact that it also has a bad effects in our environment as well. Just like what you've said earlier, using chemical fertilizers and many other factors um, that could really create a bad effects in our environment. What is your opinion about the compromising our environment over the goal of making the economy rise?
Very good question, a very thoughtful area. Like what you are saying, if I understood your question is, well, we maintain agriculture at the same time, we need to have a higher scale of lifestyle or something like that, right? And so we are just completing one book chapter, what we call the sustainable and developing world, developing economies, the sustainable value chain. Now, you want to do that. I think basically we need to have a higher return, higher improved lifestyle. And if you measure that improved lifestyle through dollar values, you need to have more income per unit of land area. And so in that process, what compromise do you have to make? Now, I think this is the kind of question all these research I was referring to, trying to address that we need to have, and this is why, let's say one of my research project, livelihood improvement through climate smart agriculture. When you say livelihood improvement through climate smart agriculture, it's just not one project, but it's a theme area that number of us around the world are working together. So we want to improve livelihood, and improve means just not what I have today, it is continuous. We can always continue to improve our lifestyle wherever we are. But in terms of economic returns, yes, true. But at the same time, we need to look to the other costs we are doing it to the environment, like soils, right, and the atmosphere, and what impact we are making it. So that's the balance. So we need to improve, and that's what people are doing consistently. People are doing it. Not if we ask to any farmers will not say, I don't care about natural environment. Farmers will say yes, exactly same question, Jamal, that you asked. They will ask that question. I want to improve my lifestyle. I need to make a more return of my effort per unit hour level that I'm putting it on my farm. But at the same time, I don't want to make a system unsustainable, right? So this is where we need to access the latest outcome of research that's available, and then our thinking and adaptation and social behavior works for us. I think it is possible, and this is why people are doing all those United Nations Sustainable Goals that we talked about, referred to. This is what is driving current research, and most of the research proposal these days, you have to address that how your work going to improve livelihood at the same time, not costing the environment or the sustainability issues.
Right.
Okay, thank you,
That's
sir.
true. Yeah, that's the main issue of the resource and resource economics discipline. Yes, thank you, Professor Huda. Maybe one more question, because we are running out of time. I pick Hasna.
There's one
Hasna.
comment I can see from Peria. I think somebody said, what should we integrate to maintain the quality and condition of the lands we have in our community? And the Peria asked that question, what should we integrate to maintain the quality and condition of the lands we have in our community? Very good question again. And it's very important to maintain the quality of the land, right? This is what we are talking about. Now, one slide or two slides said that carbon sequestration. Now, microbes. Earlier days when the farmers, including my own family, uncles back in West Bengal, India, they are using only organic fertilizers, which are mostly the cow dungs and waste. So there's a earthworms. You go in the soils, you dig it, you get some earthworms, and the quality of the soils indicates the quality of the soils there, right? But over time, when we had cropping intensity increases, and people have to grow more than 2 or 3 crops in a year, rice and rice followed by another rice, or rice followed by rice or another dry crops like legumes, like lentils and mustard and all that. So farmers are using different kinds of planting technology, like in this case, not only fertilizers, but soil compaction issues. They're using the tractors these days and working on the soils more compacted. And that way, the quality of the soil goes down and the productivity goes down as well. Now, some of the issues, again, bringing in Australia and India, some parts like Punjab area, which is one of the most successful green revolution outcome happened in India, Australia, India, for example, even in here as well. So by using lands over and over without crop rotations, when one crop with the other crop, depending on the relationship, leguminous crop and another crop adds some nitrogen to the soil. I don't know how much the area, I'm not sure whether she or he is understand that what you call the nodulation and microbes activities. So there are some crops only takes from the soil. Okay, there are some crops, if you grow, they not only take, but they add to the soil. Okay, some nitrogen they add to the soil. So we need to have a combination of this is a science and practice. Okay, the growers, farmers may say, no, I don't want that. It may add nitrogen to the soil, but its value is less. So we don't want to grow that crop. But over time, people have realized it. That not only is useful to this, if you don't do it, what will happen in 2 years, 3 years times, it will go out of production. It happened. So, and then disease will come. Like good example in Australia about the canola introduction, wheat after wheat, farmers are growing in Australia. And at some point in time, a few years ago, there's some kind of wheat disease has come. So through research, people found they need to have a break on crop rotations. So that's why coming wheat and then canola and all that kind of stuff, so that the soil conditions and land conditions are maintained and sustainable. So that's again a very good question to look into the quality, the research done, and then alternatives are there. For example, the crops that you're growing, if it does not give you enough return immediately for they produce, so add value chain. And this is where the agribusiness concept will come. They produce, add some value to the production that you're doing it and sell it on the market where you can get higher prices and higher return. So those are the kind of things, economics and business, and this kind of people like you're asking the question. I'm very pleased the kind of question that I've heard and the discussion. If we can use it, so that will be a very good interactions and linkages of agriculture and business and economics and social sciences, right? And the entrepreneurs and entrepreneur-driven society. That's what will happen, I think, then. So the science will inform to those kind of demands that your students are asking, Melanie. There's all kind of things, how science can help. I think very good.
Yep. Collaboration, yeah, Prof.
Yes, collaboration.
Yeah, this multidiscipline collaboration and
Yep.
multi-stakeholders always the key for improving our life quality. Okay, maybe can I have one more question from the student, Prof? Is it all right? Prof Huda?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hasna, do you want to ask your question directly to Prof Huda? Or you want me to just read? Yeah, okay. Professor Huda, so in Indonesia, we have those events such as a wedding party. This is a behavioral problem, yeah. In wedding party that serve so many foods for the guests, but in many times those left food become a food waste. Do you have any suggestion for this kind of issue? Is there any prediction for how long we can stay with this behavior? Yeah, that's Hasna's question, Prof.
Excellent question, Hasna. I think we, as I said, we finished the project in Qatar. Many of you might know Qatar because it's 2020, the year 2022, the soccer is coming there, hopefully. And it's a little small country, but rich country in the Middle East. So similar kind of thing, we found that, and it's cultural issues more than anything else. And when we discussed with a number of people in the society, individual level, but also some hotel managers or restaurant managers and store managers, we found that people are saying that we put some food on the table, like weddings you're talking about, right? And that we can eat festival, like festivals, any kind of festival that we have, religious festivals and other festivals that we have. We produce more and different kinds of high value food, many times not to feed, not to eat, but to show our status, how well placed we are, that, I went to X's home and they put 20 types of desserts and 20 types of this kind of food. And other guy 30 times, and there is a competition. And then ultimately what happens, they throw it out. As you say, in the wedding, they may have planned for 100 guests or maybe 500 guests or 50 guests. So sometimes we cook more and make more because in case something happens. And some of the cultural factors is we don't want to show that we ran out of food. You get some guests coming home, and if you do not have enough food, you feel, very bad. And I can very much relate to it, coming from very much modest, ordinary, average family from India. I could see if we do not have enough rice is the main food there. That means that's a problem in the family. Or they have not enough food. So you need to have enough. If you're not eating it, next day, of course, we have a system. Here it comes. We had a system back in those days. We left over the food and eat next day. Okay, there is a mechanism of doing it. You put some water in it. I know many countries still do it, I think. And even though we didn't have freeze those days in my home, but my grandmother, mother, and other people in the family, they would have technology to keep it for some time, that food to be used without getting spoiled, right? So reuse it and kind of thing over time. Now in this country, we talk leftover food, but we can only eat that much or something like that, isn't it? So we throw it. So again, a very good question. And it's not only for Indonesia, it's around the world, and different kind of contexts happen. Though people are showing it about the cultural issues and all that, but it does happen. And many times it is, they say, it's just not to how much you're hungry in the book, but also you need to show and they need to demonstrate and put. When other issues come, the food waste like that, we learned that from our papers and research, that in many countries, there are who buys the food doesn't know what will be cooked. Let's say if at home, these days I help my wife a little bit of cooking or something I do. And so my daughters and all that. So we know what to buy. Many times, if you're working day and night, and particularly in developing country like Indonesia, India, and other countries, there are people who go and buy foods for you. And they do not know many times how much to buy, and they'll get it. So even us, we go and buy. I have that tendency to some extent that go and buy. My wife will say, why do you buy so much things? No, we'll be not supposed to. But anyway, so I think those are the very, very, very important, pertinent questions you're asking. And we need to address that. And in one of the slides that we mentioned, if we are losing food and wasting food at that level, you have got lots of energy. And many times we discuss in our food table, on the children and grandchildren, among us, I think, to giving thanks to God or whatever it is you do it, that think about this food, it comes from where? How many people have worked on it to produce it, bring it? And even now, these days, to go and get shopping. Now I cannot go, we cannot go in Sydney with lockdown. So people are bringing food for us in our home. We give an order online and food are coming and they're dropping in our home. So those people are putting a lot of their effort. Of course we pay, but then how much do you pay? Is that the real time? The people are making effort to bring that food to your home. And now what happens? You throw it away. Why throw it away, right? So I think this sum of education is very important to learn and value. And I think most background and most societies teach that right from the beginning to the children. And I have been taught value of this food, but then, over time it happens. We have a tendency, we got it, throw it. Very good question again.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Huda. Okay, it's already 8 past here in Sydney, and Prof Huda needs rest and then have dinner, yeah, Prof. So yeah, we stop here now. Close this lecture by give a pause for Professor Huda. Thank you so much, Professor Huda, for giving all of us. I really enjoyed this lecture today, and also I'm sure that all these participants today really enjoy your lecture today. They are coming from 13 countries, Professor Huda.
Oh, 13 countries. Oh, excellent,
Yeah,
excellent.
13 countries, yeah, including from India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, yeah, and one from Australia.
Right.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Huda, and we hope that we can always have you in our summer course series.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure and
Thank you
honor
so
to work
much.
with you. And really, I learned a few things of these questions and answer that you happen. And in preparing, also I think about it. And but some of the questions very good. I really enjoyed some of the question interactions.
Really.
Look forward.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay,
Thank
thank you all participants for joining this lecture today. And then so tomorrow we will see you again. Okay. Thank you, Prof Huda. Thank you all participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a nice night for all of us. Yeah. Okay. Bye bye. Stay safe and